I can't believe how clueless she is. I heard my husband, Greg, say through the partly open office door, Lucy has always been good at making cupcakes, but business? No way. She doesn't even notice when I move money around, and she just signed those loan papers without looking. His brother, Jack, laughed. This is going to be easier than we thought. By next month, we'll own everything, she'll be out, and no one will blame us when the business falls apart. Greg went on, she's still in love with me after 20 years. It's too easy. I stood frozen outside the office, my hand over my mouth to stop myself from gasping. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. I stepped back quietly, hoping the old floorboards wouldn't creak. My name is Lucy Moore. I'm 47 years old and the proud owner of Lucy's Sweet Treats in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At least I thought I was the proud owner, the business I built from scratch over 15 years, the one that helped put our daughter, Emma, through college, was now clearly a target for my husband's greed. I slipped out the back of the shop and leaned against the brick wall, feeling nauseous. How could I have missed all of this? The late-night meetings Greg had with Jack, the hints he dropped for me to sign paperwork because I was too busy with baking, the way he'd started speaking to me in that condescending tone I hadn't noticed, or maybe I'd just made excuses for it? I took a few deep breaths of fresh autumn air, trying to calm myself. I couldn't confront them now, not when I was so stunned and unprepared. I needed time to think, to figure out exactly what they were planning. I couldn't believe that the man I'd married seemed like a stranger now. As I walked back to the front of the shop, I saw a shiny new car parked across the street. It had to be Jack's latest buy. I wondered how many of my cupcakes had helped pay for his lavish lifestyle. And then it hit me, what if the finances were worse than I thought? What if this wasn't just betrayal, but complete financial ruin? Lucy's Sweet Treats started as a hobby at farmers markets. I loved baking, a skill my grandmother taught me when I was growing up in a small town. When we needed extra money for Emma's braces, I began selling my cupcakes. Greg was supportive back then, helping me set up our little stand every Saturday. You've got real talent, Lucy, he'd said. These cupcakes are the best in Minnesota. When a small storefront became available downtown, Greg encouraged me to go for it. We used our savings, a little inheritance from my grandmother, and a small loan. I still have the first dollar I earned framed behind the counter. 4 years, business was steady but not great. Then, 5 years ago, one of my seasonal pumpkin cupcakes was featured in a local magazine. Suddenly, there were long lines at the door. I expanded, hired staff, and Greg, who had been working in insurance, offered to take care of the financial side of things. You focus on what you love, he'd insisted. I'll handle the numbers. It seemed perfect, like a true partnership. But looking back, I see the signs were there all along. 3 months ago, Greg asked me to sign papers for refinancing. When I asked about it, he brushed me off, saying it was just routine and I should sign quickly to lock in the rate. Last month, Jack started coming by the shop more often, taking Greg out for drinks, whispering whenever I got close. I'd noticed strange charges on the business credit card but thought they were for supplies for the holiday season. Even Emma, now 20 and studying business at college, had mentioned something odd during our last conversation. Dad asked me some weird questions about business ownership and transferring assets. She said, "Is he thinking of starting his own shop?" I had laughed it off then. Now, her words echoed in my mind as I stood in my shop, watching customers enjoy my cupcakes. I felt a wave of dread. My kitchen, my safe place, suddenly felt like it was built on shaky ground. The yellow walls and the sweet smell of vanilla that usually comforted me now seemed like a lie hiding something ugly. A week after overhearing Greg and Jack, I found out just how deep the betrayal went. I had taken the day off to visit our accountant, Kate, who'd been doing our taxes for years but whom Greg had recently suggested we replace. "I'm glad you came in, Lucy," Kate said, her face serious. "I've been trying to reach you." "Is something wrong?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "There are some serious problems with your business accounts," she said, turning her screen toward me. "Large withdrawals and transfers to an LLC I don't recognize. And this loan," she pointed to a document, "puts the bakery up as collateral for nearly triple its value." I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. 6 figures missing, a loan I didn't fully understand when I signed it. "Who has access to these accounts?" Kate asked gently. "Just me and Greg," I whispered. Her look told me everything. She pulled out more papers, showing irregularities that went back further than I could imagine. Greg hadn't just betrayed me recently, he'd been stealing money for years, building up to this moment when he could take everything. Kate slid a business card across the desk. This is Mark Smith. He's a financial expert and lawyer. You need to call him today. I nodded numbly, clutching the card. On the drive home, shock turned to something else, a cold, clear anger. Greg wasn't just taking my business, he was stealing my legacy, my passion, my grandmother's memory. When I got home, Greg was waiting. His smile looked different now, almost smug, as if he knew something I didn't. "I've been thinking," he said casually. "Maybe it's time for you to step back from the bakery. You're working too hard. We could sell it. Enjoy life a little." His words confirmed everything. This was their plan, tricking me into willingly give up everything they were about to steal. I forced a smile. "That's an interesting idea. Let me think about it." His relief was obvious. He thought I was falling for it, that I was just as clueless as he believed. That night, I lay awake beside the man who had been plotting my downfall, listening to his peaceful snoring. The business I'd worked so hard for, the recipes passed down through generations, the staff who counted on me, everything was at risk. I couldn't confront him yet, not until I understood what I was really up against and had a plan. But one thing was clear, this was a battle, and he had no idea who he was really dealing with. The next morning, I met with David Palmer in his downtown office. His no-nonsense attitude was exactly what I needed. "Based on what you've told me and these papers," he said, going through the documents, "your husband and his brother are trying to pull off a very clever financial scam. They're creating fake debt for your business, then planning to make you default on the loan so they can force a sale to a company they control. Can we stop them?" I asked. "We can, but we need to be careful. Your name is on these papers. Challenging them head-on could be tricky." I sank into my chair, feeling hopeless, but David kept talking. "There's another way, though, if you're open to it. We could gather proof of their plan. That could change everything legally." A spark of hope lit up inside me. "How do we do that?" David introduced me to Sarah Clark, a private investigator who specialized in business fraud. Her confidence made me feel like we could actually win. "Men like your husband and his brother get too cocky because they think they're the smartest ones in the room," Sarah explained. "We'll use that against them." Their plan was simple but brilliant. Sarah would pretend to be an investor interested in the business Greg and Jack were secretly building, using made-up contacts to get their trust and secretly record their plans. Meanwhile, I would keep up the appearance of being clueless, while making sure I secured my own position. David helped me set up separate accounts and keep track of all assets. We took photos of equipment, made inventory lists, and gathered proof of my original investments. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. At the bakery, I was still the same friendly Lucy, greeting customers and trying new recipes. At home, I played the unaware wife, pretending not to notice Greg's increasing number of business meetings. One evening, Greg told me he'd be meeting Jack to talk about insurance. I knew Sarah would be there too, wearing a hidden recorder. "Take your time," I said sweetly. "I've got plenty to do here." Once Greg left, I went into his office, something I rarely did. I needed to find any papers he might have hidden. After an hour of searching, I found a folder tucked away in his desk with copies of the loan documents, planning notes, and, worst of all, a business plan for More Brothers Bakery opening at my current location, with a timeline showing my exit. I snapped photos, my hands shaking with anger. When I returned the folder, I noticed something that made my blood run cold: a life insurance policy on me, taken out just 3 months ago with a huge payout to Greg. I called David immediately. "This changes things," he said seriously. "We need to move faster. Lucy, be careful." That night, when Greg came home, I looked at him differently. Was the insurance policy just good planning, or was it something darker? I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore, I was fighting for my life. The next day, Sarah called. "I've got them on tape, talking about the whole plan. They want to trigger the loan default next week." I felt a brief sense of relief, then fear. I wasn't ready. We needed more time. "There's more," Sarah said. "They're meeting someone tomorrow, a health inspector they've bribed to find violations at your bakery. They want to ruin your reputation before they make their move." My plan to fight back was falling apart faster than I expected. They were moving too quickly, hitting me from angles I hadn't even thought of. 2 days later, the health inspector showed up unannounced at the bakery. I recognized him from Sarah's photos: Matt Foster, a cousin of Jack's wife, known for taking bribes. "Just a routine inspection," he said with a smile that didn't match his eyes. I watched him search for violations, even planting his finger in clean areas, testing for fake residue, taking photos of perfectly functioning equipment, and writing down harsh notes. I knew what his report would say, no matter what he actually found. That afternoon, my phone rang. Emma, calling from school. Mom, something weird is going on, she said right away. Dad called asking me to sign some papers he's sending over, something about protecting the family business and needing my signature since I'm a beneficiary. My heart skipped a beat. What did you say? I told him I'd look at it first, but I'm not signing anything I don't understand. I almost cried with relief. Good, don't sign anything. In fact, don't even open the package. I'll explain everything soon. Mom, what's going on? You sound scared. I paused, not wanting to worry her, but knowing she needed to understand. Your father and Uncle Jack are trying to take the bakery from me. It's complicated, but I'm handling it. I'm coming home, she said without hesitation. No, stay there, focus on your studies, I've got help here. After we hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the walls filled with framed reviews, customer photos, and the business license in my name. They were trying to take everything, even trying to manipulate my daughter. They had crossed a line. I picked up the phone and called a real estate agent. I knew Lynette, who specialized in commercial properties. I need to know something, I said. How quickly could I sell my bakery, and what could it be worth? Her answer shocked me. Due to the bakery's strong reputation and location, it could sell for almost twice what I expected, and with the right buyer, the deal could close in a matter of weeks. A plan started to form in my mind, one so bold it made me dizzy. What if, instead of fighting to keep the bakery, I sold it myself? Not because they forced me, but on my terms, to someone who would respect what I'd built. I called David to share my idea. It's risky, he warned. If Greg finds out before we're ready, he might try to stop the sale, but if we succeed, you'll control the money, not him, and with the evidence we've gathered, we can make sure he doesn't get away with his fraud. Then Sarah called, solidifying my decision. She found out that Jack wasn't just helping Greg, he was blackmailing him. Apparently, Greg had been embezzling from his insurance clients for years, and Jack had proof. Your husband is being played, Sarah said. Jack's been recording their talks as insurance, threatening to expose Greg if he doesn't go along with stealing your business. The betrayal ran even deeper than I realized. Greg wasn't just a thief, he was a coward, controlled by his brother. That night, I drove out to a scenic overlook on the edge of the city. I needed space to think clearly. The bakery had been my life for 15 years. Could I really let it go? As I watched the city lights below, I realized the bakery wasn't just about the building or the business, it was about what I had created, what I had proven to myself. I could build something new, but first, I needed to free myself from Greg and Jack once and for all. The next morning, I called Lynette. I'm ready to sell, but this needs to stay completely confidential. I understand, she assured me. I know someone who might be interested, Helen Bryant from Heavenly Bites. She's been looking to expand. Helen was my biggest competitor, but I respected her business sense. Her 3 locations were well run, and she treated her staff well. If anyone would preserve what I'd built, it was her. By the weekend, Helen and I were in David's office, negotiating terms. She offered market value, plus a premium for the quick sale and intact staff. On top of that, I'd receive royalties on my signature recipes if she continued using them. I've admired what you've built, Meredith, Helen said. I'd be honored to continue your legacy. We shook hands, and David began preparing the paperwork. The health inspector's false report was expected any day, and Greg's loan default plan was about to be set in motion. Meanwhile, Sarah continued gathering evidence. She had legal surveillance in my bakery's office, catching a conversation between Greg and Jack where they discussed their fraud scheme in detail. Once the health department forces a shutdown, the loan terms will trigger, Greg said. She'll be so distracted by the violations, she won't notice what's happening with the business until it's too late. Their callousness was unbelievable. 15 years of marriage, and Greg saw me as nothing more than a pawn in his game. Just as we were finalizing the sale, an unexpected issue arose. The bank holding the fraudulent loan contacted me, worried about unusual activity with the business accounts. Greg had tried moving more money, triggering their fraud detection system. They're speeding up their plan, David warned. If the bank freezes the accounts for investigation, it could delay our sale. I needed more time. Reluctantly, I called Greg. The bank called about the accounts, I said, pretending to be confused. Something about unusual transfers. There was a pause. It's nothing to worry about, he said smoothly. Just some restructuring I'm doing to improve our tax situation. I'll handle it. Should I call them back? They seemed concerned. No, he said quickly. I'll take care of it. This is my department. Remember, you focus on baking. His condescending tone only strengthened my resolve. I contacted the bank directly, working with David to explain that I was aware of the unusual activities and was handling them as part of a business transition. We gave just enough information to prevent a freeze without revealing our full plan. With that crisis averted, we moved forward. Helen expedited her financing, and we signed preliminary agreements. The final paperwork would be ready in 3 days, the same day the health inspector's report was due, and Greg planned to trigger the loan default. The night before everything would come to a head, I packed a small bag and planned to stay with a friend. I couldn't stay in the same house as Greg anymore, knowing what I knew. As I was leaving, he came home early and caught me with the suitcase. "Going somewhere?" he asked, suspicion in his voice. "I need some space," I said. "I'm not entirely lying," I said. "I'm staying with Patricia for a few days." Greg looked relieved, likely thinking I was just needing a break and unaware of his plans. "Sure, that's probably good. I've got some business matters to wrap up anyway." I almost laughed at the irony. "Yes," I said, "we both do." On the morning the health inspector's report was due, I arrived at Sweet Dreams earlier than usual. Today wasn't just any day, it was the day Greg and Thomas thought they would take everything from me, but instead, it would be the day they lost everything themselves. Helen arranged for her operations manager to meet me for a final walkthrough before the sale, and David was ready with all the paperwork. Sarah had set up nearby to record what promised to be an interesting confrontation. Right on time, Thomas arrived first, briefcase in hand and a smug expression on his face. He was surprised to see me. "Meredith, didn't expect you in so early." "I'm always here early on important days," I replied calmly. His eyes narrowed but he kept his cool. "Is Greg here yet?" "He's on his way." 10 minutes later, Greg walked in with a man I didn't recognize, presumably their lawyer. When Greg saw me, he faltered for a second before recovering. "Meredith, you remember Arthur Wilson? He's handling some paperwork for us today." I smiled. "Of course, and you all remember Helen Bryant?" Greg's face paled as Helen stepped forward. "What's she doing here?" he demanded. "Helen is buying Sweet Dreams," I said. "In fact, we're finalizing the sale this morning. She's already transferred the funds to escrow." The shock on their faces was priceless. Thomas recovered first. "That's impossible. The business isn't yours to sell." "Actually," David said, stepping into view, "it absolutely is. We have full documentation proving Ms. Wilson's ownership, and we also have substantial evidence of attempted fraud by both of you." Sarah emerged, holding up a flash drive, including recorded conversations detailing your entire scheme. Greg lunged toward Sarah, but security guards, courtesy of Helen, stepped in. "Don't make this worse for yourself," David warned. "The evidence is already duplicated and secured." Just then, Robert Jenkins, the health inspector, arrived with his fraudulent report. Seeing the crowd and the tension, he stopped in the doorway. "Perhaps you'd like to explain why you were about to falsify a health report?" Sarah asked him. Jenkins looked at Thomas, then the security guards, and quickly realized the situation. Without a word, he turned and left. "You've lost," I told Greg and Thomas. "Sweet Dreams is sold. The money is protected from your schemes. And by the way," I added, looking at Greg, "I've filed for divorce." The aftermath was swift. With Sarah's evidence, both Greg and Thomas faced criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, and Greg faced additional charges for embezzling from his insurance clients. Thomas's attempt to distance himself failed when his blackmail recordings were exposed. I sold Sweet Dreams to Helen for $1. $2 million, almost double my expected price. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, and the judge ruled that Greg had no claim to the proceeds. His assets were frozen, and he faced mounting legal trouble with court-appointed representation. 6 months later, I stood in a small storefront in Eugene, Oregon, just a mile from Veronica's university. The sign painter was finishing the window display, "Meredith's Kitchen Bakery and Cooking School." "What do you think?" I asked Veronica, who stood beside me. "It's perfect, Mom," she said, squeezing my hand. "I can't believe you moved here." "New beginnings," I said. "Besides, I get to see you more often, and you get free baking lessons to impress your roommates." Part of the proceeds from the sale had gone into the smaller, more personal venture, a bakery and cooking school where I could share my grandmother's recipes and techniques. It was less about building an empire and more about finding joy. Greg and Thomas both accepted plea deals to avoid longer sentences. Last I heard, Greg was serving 3 years, and Thomas was in a minimum security facility for 18 months. Their reputations and careers were ruined, a fitting punishment for men who valued money above all else. As I unlocked the door to my new bakery for the first time as owner, I felt no regret for what I'd left behind. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been illuminating. I'd discovered my strength, proving that I was far from the naive woman they had thought me to be.